Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is There's Nothing You Can Say That I Can't Love. Yeah. And that just came out based on, I'm showing up here with Bridget and we're trying to do some work, but ultimately what ends up happening is that you and I have a conversation and a natural relationship outside of doing work. And I really needed some big listening time, and you really offered that to me beautifully. And we were just saying, how many places can you say the things that are so awful? Well, you can't, right? And how do we love everything about ourselves and our children? And I was saying, I think that's the key. The key to relationship being a working function is, how do you love all of someone, not just the bits you like, and get rid of the other bits and work so hard on changing the other bits, which ultimately drives that person away. How do you love all of them? How do we love all of our child? How do we love who they are in their entirety without needing to change them? How do we love them just as they are? And then how do we do that for our partners, and how do we do that for ourselves? So it's a pretty big conversation, but that's where we want to take it.
Yeah.
So before we get there,
we want to say a big thank you to our latest patrons on Patreon.
So cool.
So thank you so much to those who are jumping on. So it's a big thank you to Sophie, Jess, and Nikki this week.
Thank you. You guys are really becoming the lifeblood of this podcast, and it really, there's a heck of a lot that goes into the behind the scenes part of just getting free content podcast out in the world. So it certainly keeps that going, and we really hope in exchange that we're offering you more opportunities to connect in with Nourishing the Mother content and with us as well. So thank you very much. And if you'd like to check it out, head to patreon.com/NTM podcast. Also, if you'd love to become a member of our tribe and via email receive intimate discussions between Bridget and myself and keep up to date with what we've put out in the world, so you can click away and choose if you'd love to dive deeper, then head over to nourishingthemother.com.au, and on the homepage scroll on down to the red banner and drop in your email address so you can nourish more of your mother during your week.
So we wear so many masks in our world, don't we?
So many.
And we define ourselves so much by the identities that we construct. And when we face what we would term our own inner ugliness that is in direct contradiction to who we think we are, there's enormous pain there. And there's an enormous need to be able to feel held by another person to make it safe enough for you to enter that pain. And I think, I think that there must be people who never get that, right? who never make it safe enough for them to even think, let alone speak some of their own inner darkness. And we are such relational beings. From the moment of conception, we are building and constructing and reconstructing and reshaping ourselves and who we are in relationship with others. And how safe we can feel around others helps us go deeper into ourselves, or hinders us, I think. And so much is unsaid. You know, this conversation that Julie and I, you know, kind of surprisingly opened up today. You know, there was such a felt sense, you know, it was such a reminder that our nervous systems are talking before we are. You know, like she only had to look at me and I could feel every feeling that's circling through her body. And it takes courage, even as a listener, right, for us to stay with that.
Oh, man, like I'm welling up as I hear it because, yeah, the beauty.
You know? And we know it with our children, right? Like we know it. Like when we stop our brain from wanting to fix it and just be with them, we can be alchemy for them. But it takes courage. Because we have to feel what they feel. Right? And be willing to own the reflection.
And you're only going to be able to feel and therefore what we term hold for them what you can for yourself.
Because what you shame in them, you are shaming in yourself. What you shame in yourself, you're shaming them. You know, it's better off to just don't speak it. Don't speak it, because if I don't speak it, then it's not real.
It's too much, it's too big, it's too far. And then we, on some level and on many levels, slice pieces of ourselves and them off. You can be loved as long as you fit this. And in fact, I had a really stark reminder of that just this week, actually. And this is a total side story, but I was talking to someone who had experienced a loss of a family member who was in their midlife. And, you know, I was sort of talking around it with her, and ultimately this person, even though was fully grown up in the world as we perceive an adult to be, was so wounded by the perceptions of her childhood and her parents that she couldn't cope. And when I asked more about this person, everyone was so shocked and reeled, because she was the last person in the world you would expect anything to be wrong with. She was so happy. She was so smiley. She was so positive. No inklings at all of the shadow that was feeling like it was consuming her.
Her shadow was never safe.
It was never safe, right? And so her family's been left with this gaping wound that ultimately may never be healed, and they can't reconcile it with their version of truth. And ultimately I thought it's got nothing to do with what's right or wrong, what's truth or what's not truth, and everything to do with show me who you are and I can take it. And it just made me think about parenthood.
Yes.
And how much we make wrong or right.
Our children and ourselves. And when we make it wrong, and when we make it right, when we take any pole there, we have the potential to cut off pieces.
Yeah.
Right.
Rather than having a relationship that is, tell me about your experience and I will feel it with you. And I'll sit there with you. Because it doesn't matter what my mind wants to make right or wrong, or what my wounded heart wants to justify or reject. I will be in that experience with you, because there is no part of you that's not welcome here. And I heard this story from this person, and it's not where they were at with it, but that's all I could hear in this story. Was what a reminder it was to love and to be loved just as you are, without having to change in order to receive love, without having to be someone different in order to be worthy of that person. And I was reflecting on, you know, as you do in these epiphany moments of all these different relationships I see around me, and I was thinking, and on my own in the past, how much I needed to change him. How many parts of him were not okay and I needed them changed in order to be okay. And it's like waiting for the inevitable one day when when.
I'll only love you if.
It's like it's a total booby-trapped emotional and psychological warfare zone, right? Because the more that you are criticized and judged rather than loved, the more you're going to distance yourself from that, the more parts you will hide, the more disconnection there is, the less connection there is, and therefore the relationship disintegrates. I don't know, I was just having all these epiphany moments this week where I'm like, how do we love more of this person showing up in front of me so they don't need to change and they have the freedom to find their own way? How do I love that?
And it's, you know, it's no small task. And in fact, I think this is also why parenting is one of the most important and the most difficult roles we take on. Because to be in relationship with a piece of ourselves, essentially, that we've given birth to, very often our most repressed parts, you know, the stuff that has gone unconscious because it's so disowned in us, we have to meet it and learn to love it, because we are always going to love our children. But to meet and find that whole love will require us to open up and feel pain in ways we probably haven't felt it before. Because it'll be pain that we have buried, right? That we meet when our child is 5 and we realise what's stored in our nervous system from when we were 5 or 6. And we have a rage response, or we have, you know, an overwhelming sadness that we didn't even know we could feel. But our child takes us there. And then we have to meet our darkness, and we have to meet all the things we said we weren't, because our child's calling us there. And we show up because we love them so much. But in having to love them so much, we have to reconcile what that love looks like and how we can even love the part of ourselves that we deem so ugly because of how it wants to respond. But it's the stored memory of our own trauma that we meet through the eyes of our child. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Oh, God, I just feel so emotional. Even just as you're speaking, I'm like, oh, my God, yes. You know, I can feel my heart just kind of opening, which is actually a really beautiful place to be, because I feel like I've been holding on. And yeah, when you feel so tight and constricted and sometimes suffocated, and you know there's stuff there, but there's nowhere to put it.
There's no way safe for it to be.
There's nowhere safe for it to be.
But if I just keep busy, it might go away.
I just keep going, and just this moment and this moment and this moment, and I never really sit with what's come up, you know. And I started the conversation with you by saying, you know, I really recognise that we all need listening time around our wounded, sore places. And if we don't get that listening time, then it becomes cancerous in physical and psychological terms, because it becomes this growing mass that does wreak havoc in the body and in the mind, and therefore in the social and emotional dynamics of the relationship or family. And so I knew that if I held on to this most shameful thing, that my tolerance would be reduced, my ability to show up, anchor and hold presence for my child would be reduced, and my ability to regulate myself in order to offer that regulation to my child as they find their own way would be non-existent, because I'm too consumed with trying to control what's coming up for me, because it's trying to come up and I keep trying to put it down.
Keep trying to swallow it, keep trying to repress it in some way.
Yeah. So what came up for me, I mean, it's been going on for quite a while, actually. I mean, you'll kind of, if you're a long-term listener, you know the struggles I have with my third child. And I've been through many evolutions of that. Oh, God. I don't even know where to start. I decided last year that we'd kind of had the busy time with the baby and we'd done the renovation. And this year was going to be her year. It was her turn. You know, I'd packed my son off to high school and he was pretty set. And my daughter was in grade 6 and we'd done the year of her to get her to being school captain, and she was set. And I was like, that's it. This is your year. And so I set in motion more opportunities for connection and more people to see her for answers. Anyway, ultimately where that's led to is nothing diagnosable but a genetic low tone. So her muscles are largely underdeveloped. And she has super lax ligaments, so her hypermobile joints. And that means she can't run and move and climb and be active in the way that, in inverted commas, a normal child of her age would be. But she doesn't want to be either. And this is a child who when I think back, I can see it because, at 10 months old, I moved her out of a cot and straight into a full-sized above-ground bed with no rails, no pillows, anything. And at the time I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And now I look back and go, it's pretty weird.
It's funny what we appreciate at the time, right?
Because she didn't move. The position that I laid her down in her bed for sleep would be the position I would wake up to as she's calling Mom in the morning 13 hours later. She didn't move.
Which is unusual for a toddler, or a baby.
Yeah, right? And just doesn't move in general. And that's always been a really hard thing for me as I've evolved through it because, as you know, I have huge stories on body disconnection. So body connection and loving our body beyond its physical attractiveness, so what it can do and how it can move and how strong it is pivotal in my evolution as a soul. And so I have this child who embodies the exacerbated opposite of all of those things. Anyway, and then on top of that, what I'm really struggling with this week is her, in inverted commas, and I'm going to be really uncensored here, so trigger warning in advance if this is for you around body image and body weight, is her fatness. So I know it's not her diet because I know I control the food and it's good food. But she doesn't move. And we're certainly not small stature people. We're certainly big stature genetically. And that would be fine if she was in what I consider to be a healthy version of activity. But she's not. And trying to get her to do stuff, to ride a bike, to walk, to do any of the exercises that we've got for rebalancing and correcting muscles is a fucking shitstorm of emotions every time. And it's exhausting.
And how representative is she of you at the same age? If you look at the body image story and what wasn't okay for you?
Well, interesting enough, what just came up for me then was when I was thinking, no, that wasn't my story at her age. It was certainly my story when I was about, 8, certainly 8 and beyond. But at her age, it wasn't. But what was happening at her age was I was immobile because I had broken my arm. I was in hospital. I didn't get to show up at kinder and whatever the way that I wanted to because I had a broken arm. But it was a significant break. Basically back then in the very, very early 80s, I had broken my arm in half And so it was back then amputation. Literally, we're talking about the very beginnings of microsurgery. So I was the first, there was only a boy before me, and I was the second child, first girl to have microsurgery in Australia to reconnect a limb. And so it was extensive. So when I say I was in hospital, it was extensive and many operations and blah, blah, blah. So where was I at her age? I was immobile based on a broken arm. But that's just what came up when you asked me that. But I certainly have a big story on my mother hating her body and on fat. I'm just interrupting our conversation on There's Nothing You Can Say That I Can't Love to let you know Loathing to Loving program L2L started this week, but we don't start facilitation and coaching until next week. So please jump in with us and offer yourself the space to get listening around what's big for you so that you can hold more of what's big around you. Find out more at nourishingthemother.com.au. And on not looking good and being attractive. And my father's version of that was more based around spirituality and excess, because he was a yogi, versus the humility of skinniness. And on health. So fat people are unhealthy, skinny people are healthy. And I probably just represented for him a lot of different things with body image and certainly sexuality that he could never handle. So, of course, the larger your body is, the more in your face it is as well, right? So huge, huge stories. But I didn't realise this was sitting here because she's my second daughter, and my first daughter largely, I don't know, I feel like we've got through pretty well. And I could feel that it brushed on those edges, but I was able to hold myself and parent myself through it. And I said to you as I was, verbal diarrheaing, I was like, it's like I didn't know this pain was here. I didn't know. I mean, I knew I had these stories, but I didn't know how they felt. Not really.
They were more conceptual for you rather than a felt body sense.
Yeah. And I didn't know the pain that was there. And I didn't know the words that I have internalized about it because... And it's funny, right? My firstborn daughter didn't take me there. So it's like it's exacerbated the body so that I go there.
And you learned the words that were stored because they're the very words that you wanted to scream at your daughter.
So I want to tear her apart. And what I find terrifying about that is that I have the capacity and the power to do that. And sometimes that feels like such an enormous responsibility. And I use all of the tools to help me not do that. But the conflict is that that's what I want to do. In my body, I can hear the words and I want to shame her and I want to scream at her and I want to tell her all the shit that's wrong with her so that maybe she gets in enough pain that she's motivated to change. Because I need her to change. I need her to be different.
You need her to be accepted.
Yeah. I need her to fit in rather than always not. And all the words that run through my head about, fat and you're so fat and you're so disgusting and you're so, and I keep thinking, this is what I've internalized about me. It's not even her ultimately, right? The issue is me.
She's bringing you.
Yeah. So the issue is not that she is or isn't anything. The issue is, why can't I love her as she is rather than needing to love her when she changes?
Yeah. Isn't this the reality of love, right? Isn't this the raw pain of learning to love, and that we are always learning to love more?
Yep.
But that this is never what's sold to us in our culture. It's never what's safe in conversation.
No.
And so we find a zillion and one ways to avoid it. And yet when there's enough safety, you can feel it and you can change it.
Yes. So largely what I'd done this week was remove myself and use all of the tools so that I was as calm and said as little as I could say, because I knew that tongue was lashing there in the background. And then I got here and you created this beautiful space and I just kind of went, I really need to let this go. And here it is. And here it is again. But the tenderness and the relief that comes from letting your body rest, from holding that tension, I already feel it in my body will change how I respond to her when I get home.
Yeah.
And will change the energy in my family, because the tension I'm holding in my nervous system and in my body constantly by holding on to that is altering in every moment how my children and my husband respond to me and with me. So I already know by creating the space and the time and by you giving me the safety to do this that it's different. My future will now be different. My reality will now be different when I walk in the door.
Yeah, it will be.
And not because anyone else has changed.
No. And you'll find you'll be able to hold more. So your window, so even just by releasing in this way, your window of tolerance for what she brings you, which is you bringing you to yourself, will expand.
Yeah.
But it's not. But this is the reality of getting that to that level of expansion and to this growth and development that we desire on this motherhood journey means.
Yeah,
this is the reality.
Parent better.
Yeah,
right.
To do things the right way
isn't about a set of skills.
No, it's a way of being, and it's a willingness to be, isn't it?
Well, and it's a willingness to see what is brought up is mine. That my job, ultimately, at the end of all of it, with any tool, is to love them without asking them to change. And the only way to do that is to constantly morph and evolve and change yourself so that you don't need the change.
Yeah, you don't need the change to be external to somehow make you
feel
better,
okay.
you feel good.
Yeah.
But that
you feel like you can love.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can do that for yourself.
Right. How do you ask your heart to still open? And you do that by changing and having a different perspective and looking at bigger dynamics and going back to healing what has been stuck in my body, in your body. It's stuck there for me. And I can even, after I've had this release, even just now, I can feel it through my body. I'm shaking. My nervous system is shaking and eliminating.
It's processing it.
Yeah. And I feel cold and I want to curl up and snuggle and be in close physical comfort and bring back the connection, borrow someone else's nervous system to regulate. And those things will help all of my relationships rather than needing to be separate and away just so I can deal.
Yeah. Which is, I think, the default answer that a lot of people have. Is if I get the space, then I'll be okay to come back again. And yes, that can help, but we need to be able to process and we need to be able to have safety.
It's what we do with that space, though, right?
Do we numb? Do we shut out? Do we not think about it? Do we ignore it? Like how that we just come back into the same dynamic when we do that.
That's right, because you haven't gone through a process of change. And it just got me thinking about women like you, how profound it is for us to surround ourselves with, I think of it like a birth team, right? We're evolving, we're birthing the mother that we want to be and the woman that we need to be. We're always birthing someone. So who do you call into that team? And I can give you a gajillion solid as reasons to do it for birth. And yet I'd never thought of it in the way of doing it for motherhood, which is the rest of my life, right? Birth is the one moment. But to consciously create the birthing of the mother team around you is the whole point. It literally has women literally have the capacity to change my life. But therefore I must be selective about who I choose those women to be. And the amount of time I choose to show up with them.
And I think it comes down to looking at what we really value and what are we seeking to create as mothers, as women, on a conscious path of, embodying this life we've been given. And, if we want to grow intentionally and create the safety for our children to express their whole selves and be able to know that they are loved however they are, we must surround ourselves with women who set that as a goal too. Because if we're surrounding ourselves with people who think that their kids are separate to them and their kids are, just this, that, or the other, or there's no co-creation of a relationship there, if they're happy to minimize children's emotions and
behaviors are just things that need to be stopped or started,
or fixed, or shut down, then we're not going to hold ourselves to the best that we can be for our children, I think, and for ourselves, right? Because not only does our intentional way in which we do this for our children help free them of our stories, we evolve faster because we are not stuck in those stories that, might not seem to be related to our childhood, but actually they're the ones that mean that we don't kind of take as many risks in our career, or we're happy to be told what to do because we didn't realize it, but we kind of always just did what our parents told us to do because that's what we thought we should do, right? When we choose intentionally to evolve with our children, which will take us to these pain points, we create more possibility for our lives beyond our children. This is what I think this path offers us, but we need to do it consciously, particularly in terms of who we surround ourselves with. And I think what I love about the community of listeners we have here, and particularly the community of women who've been through our Loathing to Loving programs, is the way in which the mirror is held up with gentleness, but a presence that says, I will hold you here and make nothing of what you bring here wrong.
Because it's all love.
Yeah.
Right? Even the thing we hate is just love in a form we haven't stretched ourselves to see.
And this is what you're facing.
I am facing it, and it's fucking brutal. But I also have a worldly enough experience of so many consolidated moments through nourishing the mother that I know there's something bigger at play here. I know my daughter is giving me a gift to access an unhealed part of myself. And if I am willing to take that baton, I can change my future and hers and her daughter's. But I have to be willing to enter it. Instead of trying to pretend that shameful thing is hidden and not okay, is how do I still find the place to bring that shame out so that all parts of me are acceptable and I can hear the wisdom and the love through them. Because we can't hear the wisdom and the love until we've given ourselves the opportunity to meet the anger and the rage and the pain, because they are the unfulfilled cycle, and below that is the wisdom and the love. So this is love. Even as I'm experiencing pain, I know enough now to say to myself, this is love. What form is this? This is love driving me towards values.
Yeah.
Right? There's no accident in the fact that my struggle with this is also related to body image and sexuality and emerging women, which is all part of my soul's journey. And that it's in parenting.
And that we only gain mastery through how we navigate the difficult paths.
How we transform the pain.
We don't gain mastery if it's all easy.
No. And how do I be with more? Because if I can be with it when that mirror is so intimate as it is in my daughter, I can be with it with someone else outside of that easily.
Yeah.
Because it's harder to be with closer in than it is to be with further out. So it's all love. So no part of you is wrong or shameful or shouldn't be here or too dirty to say, because all of it is a form of love if you're willing to look at it that way. If you're willing to take the soul's perspective on life and the feminine journey, and certainly motherhood. All of it is a soul's journey, and all of a soul's journey is love. It's our human perceptions and judgments that cast it out and make it wrong, not the soul's.
No.
But how you access that wisdom is determined by who you put in your world. And how much space you are willing to create for yourself to get listening around those things that are deeply painful for you, so you don't need to change, manipulate, or shove in the face of the relationships you have most intimately to you. Because it's going to come up. So you can choose to do it with and for yourself, knowing that when you change yourself, you've already changed your reality. Or you can choose to continue where you're at and kind of not really kind of have a place to put it, or fully, or, you know, no touch base, and it will wreak havoc in your relationships and in your ability to hold whatever comes up. I don't think that we avoid meeting anything.
No. We just meet it in different forms.
Yeah. Yeah.
In different relationships.
Yeah. And I also, Bridget, I've been saying to you, just this week also, as all of this has been dropping into me, I've been thinking how grateful I am for that group of women that we have collated into a tribe. Because group therapy is by far, that's what this podcast is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We share, we are descendants of storytellers. And when we tell a story, it is a mirror reflection for somebody else. It's all that word mirror means. I see part of myself in your experience, and part of that is healing.
And part of that helps me make meaning that I hadn't made yet, or helps me make links before that I didn't see were there, or helps me understand myself more deeply.
Exactly.
And that is just such a rich experience.
And that's what group therapy is, the opportunity to understand so much more of yourself through the lens of witnessing other people's journeys, knowing that you will show up because that space is created for safety. You can't be vulnerable if there isn't safety there, and some degree of a predictability in it, and a trust around that relationship. And I believe that's certainly what we offer in this space. And I would love for you to be able to have the opportunity to think that very thing that can't be loved about you can be filled with compassion of I see you. Knowing that if I help you to allow yourself the space to feel it, the answers will come and your world will transform. And as ambiguous as it is, that's what our L2L program is. Because it's where we found each other. Yeah.
And it's where we keep finding ourselves, right? Like when we've hit these edges, these confounding, messy, shameful edges, it's where we keep coming back to. It's where we keep, you and I, meeting each other and challenging each other and compelling ourselves to go deeper beyond the paradigm that we're sold in this culture, well beyond that, to expand, right? To contract as we need to, and then find our expansion. So it's so much more than, you know, I'm totally loathing where I'm at right now and it's all just too hard and I'm feeling shit and I want to feel better. It's a paradigm for
moving towards that.
Yeah.
Knowing it too is love.
And embodying a practice of creating safety for all of you, because your world will show you all of you. And the harder that you find behaviors, judgments, what's showing up for you in other people is you, helping you to learn more about you. That is what this creates a literacy around, so that we can sit more deeply in our hearts, I think, ultimately, instead of casting things away all of the time, to feel some sense of more strength or safety in our own constructed identities. We can sit more settled in our hearts and in, you know, the world of love that we're surrounded by.
So I guess what we just want to float with you at the end of this podcast is there is no part of you that is so ugly that we couldn't love it. Because we're not looking at it through the lens of our cultural magazine.
Yeah.
We are looking at it from the purpose of your soul is perfect, in perfect timing, in perfect motion, and that this too is perfect. And so we will love that, knowing when you get the opportunity to feel more, you will find your own answers, and we are thrilled and humbled to be guides on that journey. So please join us for L2L this week. We start discussing content this week, but we start facilitation really and webinars next week. So please consider diving in with us.
Yes.
You can find out more at nourishingthemother.com.au.
And thank you for giving us your presence on this really vulnerable and courageous podcast.
I hope it wasn't just babble. Now I'm like, I don't even know what I said.
No. I think that you've given so many other women permission to feel deeply, right? And to voice maybe the stuff that doesn't feel safe to voice. And that is a gift. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com
and me, suburbansandcastles.com. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.